Hello everyone, welcome to our Truth Be Told YouTube channel with your hosts Rick Howard and Mike Maney.
Hello everyone, it's good to see you today. This is session number 51 of Truth Be Told, Mike Maney and Rick Howard. And so now we're working our way toward the next 50. And before we know it, we'll say this is session 100.
Yes,
So I hope that you've enjoyed the first 50. I hope you enjoy the next 50. And I hope we do them justice. This is one of those projects that if we had to do it over again, it'd probably look entirely different, but this is how we're doing it, and hopefully it'll give you enough information and challenge your thinking and help in your studies, help you feed your churches, and we're just glad to be part of it.
Yes.
We're a couple of old guys, so hopefully the Lord has taught us one or two things throughout our ministry.
Yes, never to do this again.
And what he has taught us, we have a burden to share some of it with others, because we know most pastors of Landmark Missionary Baptist churches especially probably have secular jobs, families to take care of, lots of responsibilities to pastor your own church, scrambling to keep up with your own studies for your sermons and lessons. And so if we can help along the way toward lightening your load a little bit, or giving you information that we've researched that will save you a little bit of time, or maybe, as in my case, a lot of times it actually adds more time to my studies because it prompts enough thoughts, and I want to do my own research and look into it myself. And so sometimes more information leads to more study time because it gets your brain going. But be that as it may, we're glad to be with you today. Today is April the 20th, 2022. And here in Modesto, California, in the Central Valley, it is one of those perfect spring days. Low 70s, beautiful blue sky, just a slight breeze. The plants and the flowers are happy. Just a really good, clean, clear feeling in the air. We've had a few little storms, not much rain, but enough of a system to go through that it cleans out the air. And it's just one of those great days you wish you could copy and experience about 364 days out of the year.
Right. Our day was similar.
Is it?
In terms of being ideal. At about 7 o'clock this morning, it began to snow, and huge flakes just floating down like feathers.
The sarcasm is thick, Mike. You had a similar day to us, huh?
Yes.
It is snowing there right now?
No, it stopped and it warmed up, so it's 46 degrees now. So all that's gone.
Shoveling, it's all going to melt.
Yeah, it's all melted. Yeah.
You do know it's almost the end of April.
Yes, I do. Yes.
Wow, what a late blooming spring for you. Now you had a lot of northern states are like this. A lot of states are like this. Not so much California. Have kind of, what do you call it? A false spring, false hope, or something. It's real nice for a week or so.
Yeah.
You think, oh boy, spring is in full bloom, and then all of a sudden, winter says, "You're not through. I'm not through with you yet."
Yeah. Winter gets back up off the canvas and starts slugging away again.
Well, we have a treat for our viewers today. We're going to start with a video. That's always a good crowd pleaser. So we have part of a video we're going to show you. It harkens back to a previous lesson where we talked about the rock that followed them was Christ. And we ask all kinds of surmising questions of what does it mean that rock followed them? How did that actually look? What did that look like? How did the water stay with them on their travels? How did they? So some have responded. One person said he could have decreased, and I like this thought, because it extends the idea of the miraculous to not just providing the water or the manna, but in toward their own bodies. So maybe the Lord lessened their hunger and lessened their thirst so that the amount of water would be less. But others suggested other things about how that maybe the rock stayed put, but the water somehow followed them by way of a underground stream, possibly. Maybe they would rivers or ponds or lakes wherever they camped. So, however it happened, this idea of the hand of God making sure they were provided for is the real key. Mm-hmm. However it happened, and this video, it just kind of shows where that split rock probably was, the location of it, what it might have looked like. Mm-hmm. Just to kind of give you a little visual, start with a scripture to introduce it. That's in, I think as it goes, it tells the verse, Exodus 17, I believe. Mm-hmm. So why don't you go ahead and start it, Mike? We'll just run it for a few minutes.
Okay, I'll do that.
On the way to Mount Sinai, the Israelites camp where there's no water. Moses goes up to a distinct rock and strikes it with his rod, and miraculously, water pours forth for his followers. The historian Josephus said that the split rock could still be seen in his time, and it was so big that it could not have been moved. Is it possible that this split rock still remains today, testifying to the accuracy of this story? The answer is yes, and it is stunning. This split rock was first discovered by Jim and Penny Caldwell, an American couple that was working in Saudi Arabia in the early 1990s. The local Bedouins have long had two names for this area, the Water of Moses and the Split Rock of Moses. This split rock is on top of a 100-foot hill and is somewhere between 40 and 60 feet high. And what's really amazing about this specific location in the valley along the possible route to Mount Sinai is that the rocks underneath the split rock are smooth, as if tons and tons of water poured forth, forming a miniature lake at the bottom for the Israelites to drink from. If you have a relationship with a local, they'll tell you that this area is related to Moses.
I couldn't find the stop sharing button, so the more I get familiar with this,
How old are you turning your next birthday?
70.
70.
Oh, sure. Just rub it in.
You mean that stop sharing button that was staring you in the face? You couldn't find it?
It's like looking for the ketchup in the fridge. It's right in front of me and I can't find it.
Hey, I love that I can still tease people older than me because it's getting rarer and rarer to find people older than me that I can tease about their age.
Right.
And boy, are you elder.
Some days I feel really old. Oh, man. And I'll tell you what, this technology makes you feel old. We didn't grow up with this stuff.
No,
they keep adding more and more layers to this technology. Is just when you learn one thing, it's obsolete. And there's something new to learn. It's incredible.
And then there's the music these kids listen to today. We heard that when we were kids.
Yes.
That's not music, that's just racket.
Yes. Tell you.
Anyway, before we have viewers click over to another YouTube channel, maybe we should get into something worth listening to.
There you go.
We are in Exodus 19 today. We were last session also, but we have some really important ground to cover. And some of the ground we're going to cover is material, and this is, well, I would say it's totally coincidental, but I can't really say it's totally because as I was preparing for our session today, I was also preparing for our outreach Bible study on eschatology, and that was last night. And that was recorded. I sent all that out this morning. So some of you watching both of these, my session 7 of our End Times Bible study and this session 51 today, parts of it will sound very similar. And it wasn't planned that way, but some of the ground I covered last night really just kind of a coincidence, really ties in with what I want to cover today from Exodus 19 about be ready for the third day.
Yes.
And to start talking about timestamps in the Bible and descriptions of time. How literally should we take them? Are they exact or just vaguely general or something like that? But there's so many things in this Exodus 19. Last session we covered like the first 8 verses or so, and talked quite a bit about terminology that's brought directly over into the New Testament to the Lord's people today, and so that God has a purpose for his saints that remains continual, remains constant, uses terminology to show that, shared terminology. But today I wanted to get into this idea. This was actually a message I preached at our state association last year at Citrus Heights. I entitled it, Be Ready for the Third Day. And it's really important when we study the Bible that we realize many times there are levels of meaning, layers of meaning, shades of meaning. Sometimes we try to be so literal that we become too stilted. We say, well, there's only one meaning to that term in its immediate context, and it has no meaning beyond that. We work so hard to avoid the method of amillennial people that try to spiritualize or symbolize everything. And we like to boast that we are much more literal in our approach to the Bible. But the Bible is a spiritual book. The Bible is full of signs and symbols and types and shadows. And we are to allow that to come into our thinking when we look at particular terms and ideas and principles. Also, the fact that the Bible develops themes through the Bible that literal terms play into. For instance, this idea of the third day, and this is found in verse 11, Exodus 19, where the Lord told Moses to tell the people, let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day, the Lord will come down upon Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. So you look at that literally in its context and you say, okay, 3 days from now, the Lord's going to come down on Mount Sinai. And that's the immediate application. That's the first one that should be brought out. And it literally did happen. And then we move on. But you read a verse like that, and if you have a broad knowledge of the Bible, immediately you start thinking of other passages and other principles and other ways that this idea of be ready for the third day can be used. For instance, the third day of Christ's resurrection. He basically told his disciples before his death, I'm going to go to Jerusalem to die. I'm going to rise the third day, and I'm going to appear to you. So be ready for the third day. Well, they weren't really very ready, were they?
Right. Yeah.
When he appeared to them in the upper room, the door was closed. All of a sudden, he appears. The women had ran back and said, the tomb is empty. He is risen. They really didn't believe the women. They had doubts. They were uncertain. So they didn't do the best job of preparing for the third day. But all of us are to prepare for the third day of Christ's resurrection and what it means. So that's why we tie the death of Christ so closely to his resurrection. They're both dependent on each other. And our justification, our salvation, our every spiritual benefit we receive from God through Christ is dependent on him coming out of that grave the third day.
That's right.
And his resurrection is only glorious because of his brutal death. And I like to say that, you know, we've all seen movies and pictures and read the descriptions and details of what a crucifixion is like, especially after he was beaten like he was, and after he was dehydrated from his own sweating of sweat and blood in the Garden of Gethsemane. He was already just about gone. You know, the angels had to come to minister to him, and that's before his beatings and crucifixion. So, you know, as brutal and as extreme of pain and suffering as was his death, the only thing equal to that in extremity is the glorious power of his resurrection. It's the only thing that can match the brutality and ugly pain and suffering of his death. They're both on what I would think would be like equal levels of extremity. One not so good and the other terrific. So
there's also Hosea 6:2, or 6:1 and 2, that goes along with this as well.
Yes, it does, and we will get to that in a few minutes. Actually, pretty quick. But this, we've talked about this before. This principle in the 6 days and then the seventh day of creation, and that God is trying to teach us some larger things.
Yes.
About the 6 days for man, and the seventh day being the day of rest, the millennial. Then when we look at Hosea 6:2, we may as well just turn over and read that now. I dealt with this some last night, and it raised some questions because, as usual, I was trying to cover too much ground in too short a time.
Yeah.
So you don't always take time to stop and explain yourself, and some said it was a little bit too overwhelming. So I try to be careful. Not that I am so smart to have so much information, but you know, when you studied and thought and meditated and prayed, and you just kind of get full of a particular subject and you have a limited time to deliver it, you tend to overload people's system. But we've looked at this before, but let's look at it again because this ties in with the third day. Be ready for the third day. Hosea 5, let's start in verse 14. For I will be like a lion to Ephraim, so Christ as the lion, and like a young lion to the house of Judah. So we're talking about all 12 tribes, talking about the entire nation. I, even I, will tear them and go away. So right away we think of John 14. Okay, I'm going away, but I will come again. All through those chapters in John, he talks about going back to his Father, but he will return. And so when it says, I will tear them, so we think of passages like in Matthew 3, where John the Baptist said that he's going to separate the wheat from the chaff. Now that's the tearing of the nation. We think about the parable in Matthew 13 of the wheat and the tares, and how that at the end of the age he sends his angels to separate the wheat from the tares and gathers the wheat into his barn. So there's the resurrection of the saints, and then the tares are in the fire of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And so then in Revelation 14, starting in verse 14, is the time of the harvest where he gathers the good grapes to himself. And then it goes on to describe to the end of that chapter the gathering of the clusters of grapes for wrath and judgment, where he treads the winepress of the wrath of God with them. So all through in the Gospels and in Revelation, this idea of rending or tearing the nation by separating the wheat from the chaff was very dramatic. It was very graphic.
Mm-hmm.
It was very powerful, what it did to that nation. And the vast majority of them, it's the same thing as describing the pruning of the olive tree, Romans 11. And all these are just pointing to the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Vessels of wrath and vessels of mercy and glory, there through Romans 9 through 11. Just different ways of describing the same principle. So I will tear them and go away. I will take them away, and no one shall rescue. So there was nothing anyone could do to stop that process. Now, individuals, as part of that process, could change whether they would be wheat or chaff through repentance and faith, receiving John's baptism and receiving Jesus as the Messiah. So they themselves could change their destiny or the results of being torn. No one outside. There's no one beyond the power of Jesus to do what he was doing to the nation. I will return again to my place. So that's John 14, simply, very easily seen. How long will he return to his place? Till they acknowledge their offense. So there's one of the famous tills or untills of the Bible, which are very key. And they acknowledge their offense. You notice offense is in the singular. We're all guilty of many sins. We're all guilty of the sinful nature. But their particular sin, there in John 19, when Pilate said, what shall I do with Christ? What shall I do with him? And the people cried out, crucify him, crucify him. And the Jewish leaders said, we have no king but Caesar. So they committed treason against their God, against their king. And that was the singular offense. And that's what they will acknowledge when he returns. Zechariah 12:11 and other passages, Revelation 1 and 7. They shall look on him whom they pierced, and they shall weep in repentance. So until they acknowledge that offense and repent of it and put their trust in him, they are under what we call covenant discipline. And when he returns, there will be 1/3 of them who survive, and they will repent, and they will acknowledge their offense. And so he's going away to his place until that particular time. So that hasn't happened yet because he hasn't returned yet. They haven't acknowledged it yet. Then they will seek my face in their affliction. So they're sent out there in the wilderness to escape the total destruction by the hands of the Antichrist. They will diligently seek me. Now, it's not really said here, so you have to go to other places. I mean, even just something like the Great Commission in general. But then the attitude of the early church was always to the Jews first. And I think we're going to return to that to some degree during the tribulation. So why will they seek him? Well, maybe there will be saints who will have clear understanding of what's going on through the tribulation, who will be preaching it clearly, with this maybe a special effort toward the Jews, because we read passages like this and we want them to repent and believe. We want them to turn to their Messiah. We will be telling them what to expect. We will be telling them what are the next things on the prophetic timeline. During the tribulation, we will have, it's called the masculine, that's the Hebrew word, translated in Daniel 11 and 12, Daniel 12:11, 12:3. Those who are wise shall shine like the stars. Those who help convert many to righteousness will shine like the stars forever. That's immediately after verse 1 and 2 describes the Great Tribulation period. And that ends in the resurrection in verse 2. And during that time, those who are wise, the masculine, shall turn many to righteousness, and they shall shine like the stars. In 12:11, it talks about the wicked shall not understand any of this, but the wise shall understand. And back in chapter 11 of Daniel, in verse 31, those who understand shall teach many. So I really believe we will have a large active role during the tribulation in the future conversion of Israel. Now, as a result of that, many of the saints will be beheaded and killed. So at the same time, we are shouting from the rooftops what our understanding is of the events in the near future. We will also be martyred. And so many of those who understand shall fall by the sword. That's Daniel 11 also. But the purpose of even martyrdom of those who understand is so that the saints who remain shall be purified and made white and shall step up to take their place. So I just see, the more I understand this concept of the role of the saints during the tribulation in the future conversion of Israel and the conversion of other people, and as just a witness, what does it say in Revelation 12 and 11? They shall overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. So why are we being killed? The word of our testimony.
Yes.
And they did not love their lives to the death. So we're going to be willing to die because we know the message is so important to get out. And some of that message is going to reach Israel in the wilderness and will cause them to seek the Lord. And when they see him coming in the clouds to the earth, they shall look on him whom they pierced, and they shall weep. And so there's just a lot built into this Hosea passage that is not really said here, but there is a lot of details given. Chapter 6. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say that during World War II, if you were found guilty of helping a Jew, you were putting yourself in danger. And so I think what you just pointed out, that those Christians who help Jewish people, because Antichrist, of course, is going to go after the Jews, with intense hatred. And so he turns against God's people, their seed, as it were, because I think they're helping. In general, he's probably just going after them because they're opposed to his religion to begin with. But I think when he sees these Christian helping the Jewish people, I think they just become number one on his hit list, or up there anyway. So I can see that.
Yeah, I think the Holocaust, some say that was the fulfillment of a lot of these prophecies about the turning against the Jews and how many of them are killed, and the role of Christians in helping them. And a lot of that did happen during that time. That does not, maybe a precursor, but it doesn't fulfill. Kind of like Israel being reinstated as a nation in 1948, a necessary precursor, but it doesn't fulfill all the prophecies.
Right.
There's yet to be a spiritual conversion of the nation, and the role of the church in that. Then 6:1 of Hosea, come and let us return to the Lord. So this seeking the Lord and returning to the Lord is building in them out there in the wilderness, and partly I think through our message and efforts. He has torn. So this goes back to 5:14. I will tear them at his first coming, and at his second coming they acknowledge he has torn, but he will heal us. Well, how do they know he will heal us? Again, the role of the church, the saints, we know all of this. We will know all of this clearly. And we will be given the grace to declare it plainly so that we will be able to tell unconverted Jews that you will be converted at the return of Christ. Prepare your heart, that kind of thing. He has stricken, but he will bind us up. So here it is, the 2 days. After 2 days, he will revive us. So after 2 days, from what? After the 2 days of him returning to his place back in 5:15. After 2 days, he will revive us, and we might make that 2,000 years. If we go back to the original creation of 7 days, so there were 4 days, 4,000 years from the first Adam to the last Adam, and then 2,000 years since the death of Christ. They're real close, within a few years of it now. And then so it's 2 days, but it's really 6 days when you add the 4 days from Adam.
Yeah.
And then the 7th day, which is the 7th day overall, is the 3rd day here. So it's the 3rd day from when he went back to his place. So after 2 days, he will revive us. So there's the idea of conversion, resurrection, bringing back to life. On the 3rd day, he will raise us up that we may live in his sight. So this is a powerful, detailed prophecy that it's only in the last several years, maybe 5 to 10 years, that it's really kind of captured my attention. I never really shared it a whole lot till the last few years because it seems almost too detailed and accurate to be true.
Yes.
In what it's trying to tell us. But so last night in our Bible study, I was talking about Matthew 12:32 of this age and the age to come. And I started talking about this idea of exactness of time. So these 2 days and this 3rd day that he raises us up, are we to take that literally in the sense that it may represent 1,000 years? Or is it something just general or vague? And well, when God told Moses to tell them to get ready for the 3rd day, did that mean, well, it might be the 2nd day, it might be the 4th day, it might be the 5th day? No, it was the 3rd day, wasn't it? So it was an exact period of time.
Yes.
Jesus said, I'm going to Jerusalem and they're going to kill me, and on the 3rd day I'm going to rise again. Could that have meant the 2nd day or the 4th day or the 5th day? No, it was the 3rd day. Because Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish. So those are exact time periods. When we get into Daniel and Revelation, Daniel a couple of times talks about time, times, and half a time. So you come along and say, well, okay, I'm kind of uncertain as to what does that really mean? Does that really mean 3.5 years? But all doubt is removed when John clarifies it in Revelation. So John makes sure that he uses, this is chapter 11, 12, and 13, is all these timestamps. So John uses time, times, and half a time in the close context of also describing events of that same period of time times and a half a time, by describing it as 1260 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then he also uses the term 42 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I've concluded that what God is doing, because Revelation is often interpreted almost totally symbolically by many people, but I've concluded that when it comes to time periods, numbers that describe time periods in the book of Revelation, we are to take it literally.
Mm-hmm.
So by God using three different terminology ideas of a same period of time, it's kind of like he's saying, I'm telling you, this is 3.5 years. I'm
Pay
telling
attention.
you three different ways. So, if it was just one, like a real common means of interpreting in Revelation is to take the 1260 days to mean 1260 years.
Mm.
And I know that's what we're doing in Hosea, the 2 days and 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
There is merit to it in the Bible, but God's telling us, I don't want you to do that here, because the 1260 days is not 1260 years. This was a real common idea back in the 1820s and 1830s and 1840s, when prophecy really took front and center. That's when the Mormons, Jehovah Witness, that's when the Church of Christ, Alexander Campbell,
Seventh-day Adventists,
Seventh-day Adventists, the hard shells, just a lot of different major groups developed during just those few decades. And many of them, or most of them, were prompted by their views on prophecy. And even a lot of landmark Baptists, a lot of Anabaptist type of people, if you go back and read their writings, they adopted this kind of idea. And a lot of it was based on simply the fact that they thought the Lord was going to return very soon, like we do today. They would often start with the idea that the full development of the Roman Catholic Church, the apostate church, over the course of a few centuries, from Constantine until the first really true universal pope, was about 600 or 606 AD. So they'll take that general time period, then they'll add 1260 years, and then they'll come up with the 1850 to 1870 or something like that. So if you're living in 1830 and all these various groups are developing and they're all building their own prophecy, and they're having these major prophecy conferences all over England, came over to America. So prophecy was really in the limelight. And so this feeling that the Lord's going to return soon was strong. And then you realize, well, if we add 1260 years from Revelation to around 600 AD, probably within the next 20 to 30 years, the Lord's going to return. You could see how easy it was for them to let that grab hold of them. And of course, several of those groups kind of cast their whole lot on that idea, and they were greatly disappointed. They were setting dates and selling the properties, and going up on the mountaintops and things like that.
Yeah.
The Lord didn't return, and the great disappointment, it was called in one group, and all that. So I think what the Lord is doing to help us avoid that mistake is saying, well, the 1260 days is 42 months, is time times and half a time. And so what I did last night, and I sent it out this morning, I should have had you print yours out so that you could refer to it. I sent out a copy of the study notes that I passed out last night, and I just drew a timeline, and from the death of Christ to his return. So we'd call that this age. The age to come would be the millennial. And I had this little gap of time in between those two that I call birth pangs. It's the Great Tribulation. And so you have let's just take the age to come. The age to come is an exact time of 1,000 years. So we accept that. That's an exact time. Mm-hmm. The 7 years leading up to it is an exact time. It's 2 sets of 3.5 years, set apart in the middle by the abomination of desolation and the casting out of Satan. And those are precise time periods. And then I also mentioned last night, and I don't think I have it on the handout, but even the 4 days, the 4,000 years from Adam to Christ. And I know there's a lot of different opinions about maybe the genealogies were not exact. Maybe they missed some names and generations. Maybe it was longer than 4,000 years. But, if you take the major time stamps in the Old Testament, we know very close when Abraham came into the land of Canaan, left Haran and came down to the land of Canaan. 75 years old. We know about real close to the date. We have other timestamps about how long between the Abrahamic covenant and the law covenant, 430 years. We know you went over this, the date and the Pharaoh when Israel left Egypt. Mm-hmm. We're told how long it was until the Temple of Solomon was built. We have certain timestamps like this that we can start setting anchors down. Mm-hmm. And then we can start plugging in the genealogies where it does tell, this man was this age when he had this son, and then his son was this age when he had this son. And so if we just take what the Bible tells us on face value, then what Bishop Ussher, 300 or so years ago, and others have confirmed, like I've told you before, the main chronology book I use is the Chronology of the Old Testament by Floyd Nolan Jones, and I haven't sent you your copy yet, as I promised I would, but I'll get to it. He's a modern chronologist, and he spent a lifetime studying these things, and he claims that independently of Bishop Ussher, he came up with the same exact date for the creation of Adam, which is 4004 BC. Mm-hmm. Most of them also have concluded that Christ was born not at 0, AD or BC, but probably 4 BC. Well, if those two dates are accurate, and as best we can tell, they're as close as we can get, 4004 BC to 4 BC is exactly 4,000 years. Mm-hmm. The 4 days leading up to the 2 days of Hosea 6:2, and then the 3rd day, so 7 days total. Well, my point is this, and it never quite gelled like this before, but my question is this. If the first 4 days of 4,000 years is exactly 4,000 years, if the 7-year 70th week of Daniel is exactly 7 years, and I know we can get into, unless he shortened the days, and what about the 1290 and all that, but I'm just talking about in general, an exact period of time. If the millennial then is an exact period of time, so if we take those 4 periods of time, the first 4 days, the next 2 days, the 7th day, and then that 7-year period in between of the tribulation, at least 3 out of the 4 have exactness of time built into them. So my question last night was, should we build that same exactness of time into the 2 days And so this is what kind of sends shudders down people's spine, is that if Christ was crucified on 30 AD, as many conclude, and then we need, if he returns, there's 7 years of tribulation period leading up to that. That would mean tribulation starting in 2023. So we discussed after we quit recording last night how that, there's so many red flags. I read just before we came on, I was reading about Russia pretty much has taken control of the eastern part of Ukraine, and how that it's just interesting to me how that so many Western leaders in the US and Europe are just itching for us to jump in completely to that thing and risk nuclear war. Instead of just sending arms and sending food and sending equipment things. They're wanting us to jump in with both feet. Then I read just before we came on, it may have been, I didn't read all the details, but may have been a dramatic headline. Turkey has invaded Iraq. Evidently, they've been having problems with the Kurds in northern Iraq, and so they've sent a pretty large force across the border into Iraq to try to take care of them. Well, that's okay. That's 2 more Middle Eastern nations at war with each other. What's that going to build into? Everyone's expecting China, to take Taiwan. Many people are predicting that Russia has their sights on Poland because so many Ukrainians have gone across there and things about Poland. But in what's going on with the worldwide currency, trying to move away from the US dollar and what that might mean to our own economy, it just seemed like there's a lot of things that could cause things to fall apart almost overnight. And to the point where no one has the answers until one man says, I have an answer.
Yeah.
And people look at him like, who are you? We really don't know much about you. You're from this little nation. You don't have a big army, and you're trying to tell us that you know the answer to peace.
Yeah.
And then he presents it, and they all say, that's just wonderful. And he somehow gets Israel and those 10 nations that are at war with Israel to agree to this. Possibly, let's just try it for 7 years. See if we can make it work.
Yeah.
So you and I have spent our whole life studying the end times, but just the possible realization that if all of this exactness of time I'm trying to present is really a bigger factor than we've let it be in the past, are we really that close? Did he mean 2 days means 2 days, 2,000 years? I died and rose again in 30 AD, and so I'm coming 2030. And I know there's been changes in calendars and the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar. So, there are some factors involved that could change things to some degree, but I think it's really something to think about.
It is. And back to our text, be ready against the third day. So the underlying important principle is be ready. And that's what Jesus was saying.
Be ready for the third day.
Yeah. Because
the largest warning of being ready for the third day is being not deceived. So he mentions that 4 times in Matthew 24. Even before he answers their questions, he said, make sure that no one deceives you by any means. Paul picks up on that in 2 Thessalonians 2. Make sure that you're not deceived. So it just tells us that there's going to be a lot of deception.
Yeah.
And for deception to really be deception, it's going to not appear to be deception.
Right.
So it is going to deceive the vast majority.
Yeah.
And it's going to reach a place where they are totally deceived that they cross over the line to the point where 2 Thessalonians 2 says God's going to send them strong delusion because they've chosen to believe the lie.
Yeah.
They've fallen so hard for the deception that God says there's no turning back. And so he sends them strong delusion. Well, God sends you strong delusion, and there's really no coming back from that.
Game over.
Yeah, game over. So,
yeah,
we talk about be not deceived. We kind of try to make a big deal out of it, but I don't think we make a big enough deal out of it. It tells me that the deception is going to be so strong. He said in Matthew 24, if it would be possible, he's going to deceive the very elect. Well, that tells me that those who are not the very elect definitely will be deceived, and even some of the very elect will be close to deception.
Yeah,
So it's a really big warning.
So no wonder Jesus said, "Watch and pray." You got to keep watching. You got to keep your eye on the ball, as we're doing in our videos. Watch and pray. That we don't succumb to this.
Yeah.
Just stay alert. Stay alert.
There's quite a bit more in Exodus 19 I would like to get to, but it becomes pretty large in itself. So maybe we should stop for today on just be ready for the third day. But I want to get into the role of the trumpets in all of this and how they become also very prophetic. The older I get, the more I study, the more I say this, the more it really sticks in my thinking is how important it is to let the Old Testament provide the headwaters, the root, the foundation of so much prophetic teaching in the New Testament.
To help navigate us through this.
Yes. And this idea of being ready for the third day, maybe we haven't done a real clear job of it or complete job of it, but I think enough to show that way back here in Exodus 19, this principle of being ready for the third day, of God telling his people something big is going to happen on the third day. Just that general idea is easily carried into the New Testament. Both the resurrection of Christ and the effect that's supposed to have in us, and then the third day of the coming of Christ and the resurrection, the third day being the seventh day.
Well, even the word ready is brought over, even the English word ready. Yeah, if you're going to go with that. Yeah.
Just those two words, huh? Be ready.
Yeah.
You go to Mark 13 and many other places where what I say unto you, I say unto all. Be ready.
Yeah. And then Matthew 25, they that were ready.
Went into the wedding.
Yeah.
And we're going to see the same thing in next session about the trumpets. And I want to take time to develop it because I'm going to have to go into Leviticus, look at the Day of Atonement, Jubilee, and all of that. So it gets fairly involved in. So I don't want to pass over it too quickly today. But thank you for that video. That was interesting about the rock. It really helps having a visual of it.
It does, yeah. And I think we told our viewers, I think in previous sessions, that this information is out there. There's been other people have gone to the same location. And so I have close-up images of the pillars that were there, and then later on the palm trees, the 70 palm trees, the wells. They even say they discovered a graveyard about 3 or 4 miles away from that site, where there's multiple signs of people having been buried. Well, that would be the 3,000 that God slew. And so all of this is in that general vicinity that we saw today. And so I'm convinced that that's the location.
Yeah, the more excavation, the more research that people put into these Bible events, the truer they become.
Yeah.
And, you know, these things that have been scoffed at and said
Yeah.
to be fables and are proven to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, even a lot of information about Noah's Ark.
Mm-hmm.
And so who knows before the Lord returns how much he will allow to be revealed,
Mm-hmm.
so that they will have no excuse by the time he comes back.
Yeah.
That it will all be proven to be true.
Yeah.
And if you reject it, you're rejecting it with full knowledge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wouldn't doubt that's kind of the course that it takes.
So, you know who we haven't heard from recently, and that's Rocket Man over there in North Korea.
Oh, well, that's another one that could blow up overnight, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and even you know, we talked about the hot spots around the world, but even in our own nation, uh, with the election coming up and the extreme left having taken over the Democratic Party, and they are in power now, and they can read the polls. They know that they might be facing, you know, devastating losses and loss of power, especially. And what the far left has no scruples, no morality, no sense of God, no sense of values, especially those at the founding of our country.
Mm-hmm.
So, to what extreme would they be willing to go to hold on to their power? It appears that they've already made some moves. It appears that they're willing to throw their own president under the bus, but they hate the two next in line alternatives. So, what are their other options? It wouldn't. I have no doubts that they would be willing to create a constitutional crisis, hoping that when they come out the other side of it, they'll have enough support from the court system to major media to the tech companies. You know, the ones who really have great power are pretty much on their side.
Yeah.
So they may be willing to take the gamble. We're willing to turn everything inside out and upside down. And when the smoke clears, we hope to still be in power.
Mm-hmm.
We're willing to do great damage to our nation.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I'm wrong, but you know, if this timeline we talked about in next year could possibly be, you know, the trigger of the start of the 7 years, but you know, we may be here 5 years from now still talking about the same subjects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I understand all that.
Yeah.
So we have to be cautious. But you know, if this exactness of time idea is correct, then a lot of major events may happen between now and this time next year.
Mm-hmm.
That will really unsettle. I mean, there's a lot of predictions about a stock market crash.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of predictions about another housing market crash because the prices run up so high, and now the mortgage rates are jumping up. Mm-hmm. So fewer and fewer people are able to afford a home. You know, there's talks about college debt. It's a huge amount. There's a lot of talk about the government always needing more. What do they call it? They need more of our money, revenue, they call it.
Yeah, yeah.
Put a nice face on it. Yeah. Where is one of the largest sources of potential revenue for the government right now? Well, it's basically the entirety of Americans' retirement accounts that are right now have, you know, kind of tax benefits and protections built into them and all that. But, you know, the government's always looking for more sources of money, and they're seeing this, you know, bazillions of dollars of people's retirement money sitting there. How can we tap into that and take part of it? Mm-hmm. And maybe we'll guarantee that we'll pay it back, or you know, some sort of system to where enough people will go along with it, you know, that they feel like the government to take care of us. I don't know. there's just a lot of major things. There's a lot of concern about cyber attacks and how that would cripple our country. Without firing a shot, maybe China could cripple our country with a cyber attack. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
We may be sitting here a year from now saying, aren't we glad that nothing major like that happened in the last year?
Yeah.
Or there may be several of those happen by this time next year. So that's getting back to your be ready idea.
Yes. Yeah.
We need to just caution our churches, our church people, to constantly be on guard, have their hearts right with the Lord.
And that's the key. God's people, is how they look at these things. Is it, oh my, or is it, step up our witnessing efforts, and don't take our foot off the gas pedal, but keep pushing forward in evangelism and trying to reach people, while we're keeping our nose to the wind and our eyes on the horizon, ourselves being ready, reaching out, instead of just hunkering down, but reaching out and trying to, win others also. So, well, here we did it first this time, brother.
What's that?
Recording. Well, no, instead of starting with politics, we're ending with politics.
Well, that's why I constantly repeat the same. I think I just did at the State Association. I always ask the question, are things falling apart or are things falling into place?
Yes.
And of course, the correct answer is both, because
yes,
God will allow things to fall apart first so that he can put them back together properly.
Yes, absolutely.
And our flesh doesn't want to go through that part of things falling apart because it's very uncomfortable and it may cause us a loss of possessions and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But God has purposely designed things to fall apart in this world system so that he can put it back together for his kingdom age.
Yes.
And he'll install the correct leader and the correct government and the correct people helping the leader.
Yeah.
And realign everything. And it'll be great once that happens. But that's why the Bible so often describes the events leading up to that, putting things into place. It describes it as a woman in travail. It builds and it builds and it's uncomfortable. And just when the woman thinks she can't last another moment, she can't push another time, that's when the birth happens. And the tribulation will see that things will seem to be completely falling apart. And then at just the right moment, the eastern sky splits open and the white horse appears with Christ on it.
Yes. Yeah. So. Yeah. And all of us will be saying, blessed is he that comes in the name of the Lord.
Yeah, for real this time. They said it on the Triumphal Entry Day, Palm Sunday.
Yeah.
They said it, but they weren't really,
their
heart wasn't in it properly. They were trying to, it's kind of like John 6, they were trying to take him by force and make him king. They were trying to bring it into reality.
Yeah.
Without having to go through the necessary repentance and faith and all that.
Right.
And so, so what did Jesus do when he entered the city? When they were saying that, he cleansed the temple. So, but he did say a couple chapters later, into Matthew 23, they'll not see me again until they say it again. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, and they'll mean it that time.
Yeah.
When they look on him whom they pierced, and they believe and repent, then they'll see him coming and they'll say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Yeah. He's going to come back into his city this time as a conquering king.
Amen.
So that's politics, but it's spiritual politics.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to
your time today, Mike. We'll be back into Exodus 19 next session, maybe a couple of more sessions. There are a few major things I want to talk about in that chapter, but it is such a pivotal chapter that you need to spend some time in it.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I noticed, and I want to encourage our viewers, I noticed you posted a really nice event invitation for your conference this summer. The Torch, is that what it's called?
Yes.
The Torch.
Yes.
Really nice visual and has all the information, dates, and everything. So I encourage everyone to go onto your Facebook page and grab that.
Yeah.
And people know about it.
Yeah. And that has kind of a meaning. 3 years ago or 2 years ago, our three conferences are kind of building on each other, so that in 2020, our thought was seeing our way clearly, as these events are unfolding around us, seeing our way clearly, 2020. And then last year was now that we see the need to see our way clearly, we need to stay the course. So once you figure out what you need to see, then you want to hold to that course, stay the course. So that was last year's. And so now we're talking about not only ourselves staying the course, but passing the torch on to the next generation so that they can continue the course. And so it's kind of a running.
Good.
Yeah. This was my son, Peter. This wasn't me. I can't take credit. He's come up.
Does he have a verse attached to that, a Bible verse attached to that?
Yeah, probably more than one, but I think the main idea would be Paul telling Timothy to train up men, faithful men, to pass it on, to others. Yeah. So to our viewers, it's July 22nd, this summer, July 22nd through the 24th, if you're able to come.
Well, thank you, Mike, and thank you all the viewers out there. Thank you for your support, and your feedback.
Yes.
Hopefully we have stirred up some thoughts that you can take and run with.
Yes, and we are up to 63. We are up to 63 subscribers.
63.
Yes.
And this is our 51st session, so
we're just staying ahead.
Adios, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.